March 22nd will, of course, be Sebastian Fundora defending his unified super welterweight titles against Chordale Booker. A very interesting fight. Now, of course, people were wanting a unification fight with him and some other fights, right? But for the most part, seems like just a title defense, right? But we'll talk about that later. But on the other card, you have Jesus Ramos Jr. taking on Guido Schramm, which it was supposed to be Salgado, but something happened and he stepped in. Somewhat good fight. We'll talk about that once again. And the opener will be Elijah Garcia versus Terrell Gausha. Very interesting matchups throughout the card. Of course, this is a free card, so you can't really make fun of the card that much, right? But besides that, Terrell Gausha is 24-4 with one draw, 12 wins by way of knockout. Of course, he is coming off of his unanimous decision loss to Carlos Adames. I thought it was a lot closer than what the other people thought. You know, it was a slow-paced fight, but I thought it was closer. You know, it was a slow fight, but that doesn't really mean it was all for Adames, right? But besides that, he had some other losses, and that was against his first loss against Landi Lara. Yeah, Gausha's been around. He lost by unanimous decision. He then got a split decision draw against Austin Trout, another good fighter. He then lost another unanimous decision to Erickson Lubin, somewhat closer fight. He then lost against Tim Zhu via unanimous decision, where he actually dropped Tim Zhu in the first round. A somewhat close fight. Definitely it was a phone booth fight, but it wasn't a lot of action. Does that make sense? And then, of course, he lost to Carlos Adames. Now, of course, he himself has some decently good wins. Obviously, he's always been around the top of the super welterweight and now the middleweight level. Never really being able to capture a title, but he has been giving these top guys nothing but tough fights. But of course, he is fighting yet again another top middleweight, that being Elijah Garcia. Garcia is 16-1, 13 wins by way of knockout, a power puncher to say the least. Now, of course, he himself is coming off of his loss to Kyron Davis split decision. Now, of course, should it have been split decision? Probably not, to be honest. I thought Davis won that one. Don't get me wrong, Garcia was coming on in the second half of the fight. Well, most likely last quarter of the fight. But for the most part, Davis won convincingly. But besides that, he's also beaten people like Jose Resendiz, a very good fighter. You know, he himself, before fighting Garcia, came off of his win against Jared Hurd. Very good. You know, a very tough, rugged fighter, and he stopped him. Kevin Salgado, once again, that was the one that was supposed to fight Ramos Jr., but once again, they pulled out. It's a very close fight, but the thing is, Garcia is somewhat of a slow starter. He was a slow starter against Salgado. He was bleeding from his nose in that fight. But his breakout fight was against Almacar Vidal Jr., where he stopped him in the fourth round. I do believe he was the B-side that time. Breakout performance, to say the least. But one of the biggest weaknesses is that Garcia is quite hittable. Of course, he was definitely seen against Kyron Davis. He was struggling a bit with Resendiz's power, getting touched up quite a bit. Of course, he does have a good chin, so that's always good, right? He was getting touched up against Salgado, Vidal. Now, of course, his power usually kind of doesn't save him. Of course, he has skill. He has a lot of skill. Let's make that very clear. He has skill, right? But his defense is kind of lacking, to say the least. But his power, of course, he's a southpaw, but once again, one of those southpaws that are flat-footed. He has good combinations, good skill, but he's very touchable, which is a very bad thing when going up against Gausha, who has a very good jab and has a very good way of nullifying offense. Of course, he did it against Adames, he did it against Tim Zhu. They didn't look as explosive as they normally would be against other opponents. Gausha is a very good fighter slowing down the pace. And this could happen again. Of course, Davis was defending, blocking, deflecting a bunch of punches, and of course countering. Unfortunately, Gausha cannot fight a similar way, but he could slow down the pace. But of course, Gausha is only getting older, so that's always something to keep in mind. But besides that, the winner of this fight will be a very different one. Of course, Garcia is coming off of a loss, so it was obviously a lot to, you could say, think about, a lot to improve on. And if he improves that defense, which I assume he will, I think he gets it done by decision. Gausha is a very durable fighter, especially because he's moving up. Definitely helps his, I guess you could say, older body. But Gausha is a very tricky fighter. Very good jab, very good defense. You know, very tough to really hit him clean. and he has fought very, very good experienced fighters. So he should be ready for anything Garcia throws at him. But I do think he edges out a win. Give me Garcia by unanimous decision. Now, of course, the next one is Guido Emmanuel Schramm. I do believe that's how you pronounce it. 16-3-2, 9 wins by way of knockout, 1 loss by way of knockout. Of course, his losses came by, more recently actually, unanimous decision against Christian Javier Ayala, Johan Gonzalez, majority decision loss, and Vladimir Hernandez. That was the one where he got knocked out in. Of course, you've probably seen the replay a couple times. Very bad knockout. Of course, his one of his draws was against Paul Kroll, majority decision draw, and his 4th ever fight against Dario Domingo Soto. Very interesting. Matter of fact, the first guy he drawed with, he also lost to Christian Javier Ayala. So that dude, that dude's pretty good himself. But besides that, he's taking on a very rugged young fighter in Jesus Ramos Jr., 22 and 118 wins by way of knockout. Of course, he is coming off of his knockout win against Jason Rosario. Unfortunately, Jason Rosario couldn't really give anything to Ramos, so that's why he's fighting literally a month later. So that's very interesting. Besides that, he himself has beaten Johan Gonzalez. He's also beaten people like Joey Spencer, Luke Santamaria, and Vladimir Hernandez and Brian Mendoza. A very, very good fighter. Obviously, he was supposed to kind of be the next guy to get the title shot, until he lost to Erickson Lubin, which very much is a controversial loss. But here's the thing. I don't know if I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. I don't know. I thought he gave up the last 4 rounds. I think he just kind of, I don't know. He looked like he felt like he won the fight anyways. And it's just like, why would you do that? It's not like Lubin isn't a PBC fighter himself. Like, they're not going to rob him. Right? And I thought he lost 4 rounds, like, kind of convincingly. I was like, for him to win 8 rounds, basically back to back to back, it kind of felt unbelievable. So I'm just saying, he lost kind of on his, it's his own fault, like literally. But, you know, sometimes you have to learn it. Sometimes you have to learn it the hard way, that you probably shouldn't take your foot off the gas, right? But besides that, Ramos Jr. is a goddamn huge fighter for Super Welterweight. I don't know. You ever seen him next to these guys? He looks twice their size. How does he ever make Super Welterweight? I will never know. This guy's huge. He has a pressure style, obviously, kind of suffocating a little bit, especially against Erickson Lubin. But then Lubin kind of let himself go to the ropes, which may or may not have been his plan. But Ramos, he's a very tough, strong fighter, and I don't think I really can't see how Guido can beat him, considering he lost. I know the triangle thing never works, but Guido lost to Hernandez and Gonzalez, and Ramos beat them both by knockout, by the way. But besides that, yeah, give me Ramos. Probably by stoppage under 6 rounds. I'm not saying he doesn't have a chance, but it's kind of hard to make an argument for him. But besides that, the main event, Sebastian Fundora versus Chordale Booker. Now, of course, Booker is 23-1 with 11 wins by way of knockout and 1 loss by way of knockout. Of course, his 1 loss was against Austin Emma Williams, where he lost in the very first round. Yeah, he lost in the very first round. There's really nothing much to say. Other than, well, it looks like he got caught with something. Kind of like his weakness, the overhand left. I really don't know. But he was stopped in the first round. But besides that, people did have their high praises for Booker, saying as one of the better fighters. But besides that, he himself is coming off of a 3rd round stoppage win against Brian Damian Chavez. And overall has some good wins, good records here or there. Not the best, but at the same time, well, he could start putting some good names now, right? But besides that name he's trying to add to his resume is Sebastian Fundora, aka the Towering Inferno. You may be wondering, why is his name the Towering Inferno? Well, he's a super welterweight at 6'5". Yeah, that's right. That man really is a tower. Now, of course, Fundora is 21-1 with 1 draw, 13 wins by way of knockout. Now, of course, this first draw was against Jamonte Clark, split decision draw. Very interesting, right? And his 1 loss was against Brian Mendoza, where he was knocked out in the 7th round. Let's just say the inside fighting for a 6'5" fighter probably came to bite him in the ass that time. But he came back and got himself a split decision win against Tim Zhu, which is a very interesting one. We'll talk about that later. But besides that, he has been coming off of some very good wins against Nathaniel Gallimore, Habib Ahmed, Jorge Cota, Sergio Garcia, and Erickson Lubin and Carlos Ocampo. Very good fighters on his resume. He stopped Lubin, otherwise kind of nullified the rest of them. Now, of course, the Tim Tszyu fight was a very interesting one because he was a late replacement. It was supposed to be Tim Tszyu versus Keith one-time Thurman. But Thurman got injured and Fundora was already on the card. So he said, you know what, screw it, I got this. And then they fought for the vacant WBC title and for Tim Tszyu's WBO title. And not to mention, was it a late replacement fight? Tim Tszyu cut himself on Fundora's elbow. Now, of course, it was an accident. He charged in on, probably he didn't expect an elbow to be that high up, but it was up. But it was there and he was cut. Which overall, most people believe that is what caused the downfall of Tim Tszyu. That fight probably should have been stopped for a no contest, but because they wanted to give the people a show, they continued, right? But Fundora has tried something in that fight where he was actually fighting tall. Yeah, I know, new concept for the guy, but he was fighting tall and it was somewhat working. Now, of course, he was getting clipped a lot, but that was undefeated Tim Tszyu, so obviously a very good fighter. And Fundora has power himself, kind of. He has 61% knockout ratio, but he has stopped elite level opposition, so he's got power. But the way it's going to go is very interesting because what happened to Tim Tszyu after the fight was that he was stopped by Bakram Murtazaliev. And many people believe that it was a Fundora fight that kind of made him washed. I don't know why people think he's washed, right? People think that took out a lot of him, took out a lot from him. And they're like, well, what happens with Fundora? Wasn't he in the same exact fight? And to that I say, I think it's better for Fundora because he's coming off of a year layoff, which is definitely better than what most people think. Like, oh, year layoff, this man's never fighting, he's inactive. It's like, bro, this man went through literal war. Just give him his time. The way it's going to go is I think Fundora wins by knockout. I think he stops Booker. Booker's a good fighter, don't get me wrong, good combination, but he's somewhat slow. He doesn't have quick hands. And the one thing that kind of you want when you don't have quick hands is timing. And I don't think he has the timing to really catch Fundora like Mendoza did, especially because I feel like Fundora's not gonna fight that way anymore. But Tim Tszyu was catching him a lot because he was a quick, agile fighter with power. I don't think Booker has it. Now, once again, the triangle thing really doesn't work. But I think Fundora just outboxes him for the most of the fight and then stops him late, probably last couple rounds. Because Booker fights like he has heavy hands. And what do I mean by that? I mean like he fights like he's carrying dumbbells. It works for him, don't get me wrong. He has fought some good people and has some good combination work, but I don't know. I feel like that will definitely be something that people will keep an eye on, right? But besides that, I got Fundora stopping him late. He's learning how to fight tall after everyone's been telling him for like the past couple fights. And besides that, yeah, I just got Fundora by stoppage, Hernandez by stoppage, and Elijah Garcia by decision. It's going to be a good night of boxing, obviously, but very interesting fights, to say the least. But besides that, what do you guys think? Who do you guys have winning in these fights? And leave them in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.